Hello and welcome. In today's video I'm going to share with you Ark's 10 best fantasy creatures. But just before we get into it, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell, as it really does help me out. In at number 10 is the Basilisk. The Basilisk came out when Arboration released, and this really was a great creature among many people. And also the Basilisk is just a very popular creature overall, as it is very well known from movies like Harry Potter. In terms of its use in Ark, the Basilisk is extremely useful at dealing all of that necessary damage. And also its second ability does deal Torpor as well, but I doubt you would knock out any creatures with it, as I'm pretty sure the damage it deals is pretty substantial. Also, on top of all of that, the Basilisk has a wealth of other abilities as well, like being able to bury itself underground, so you can easily hide your Basilisk somewhere in a PvP scenario, or if you just want to hide some loot, you can always hide some in a Basilisk under the ground and keep it in a very high density foliaged area. This thing will be really great for hiding all of those resources that you desire and need to keep so much. In at number 9 is the Astrod. Yet again, another fantasy creature that Ark has somewhat made up. And Astrod actually means space whale, and that description really does sum it up perfectly, as this thing literally is a whale that lives in space, at least in Genesis Part 1. On maps like Fjorda, that rule kind of gets broken a bit, and as you can see here, I'm not in space when using this thing. The Astrod is an extremely good PvP creature though, having a wealth of abilities like being able to bomb, and also having a wealth of camera angles around. And this thing also does have a wealth of abilities, which over time you will gradually learn how to use. And this thing deals an insane amount of damage as well with all of its abilities. The only thing is, obviously, this thing is a bit on the slow side, and it can be very, very awkward to tame, but with things like the Tech Hoverskift, the Astrod tame actually isn't all that bad. In at number 8 is the Astrod Delphus. Yet again, another space creature, this creature meaning space dolphin instead of space whale. And overall, I would say this creature is a lot more useful, as again, it is great for PvP scenarios with aerial dogfights, and this thing can shoot a wealth of lasers out of it using Element for that. But you may think that is really expensive, but trust me, Genesis Part 2 and Element really aren't a problem. Genesis Part 2 is by far the best map for farming Element. Element simply is not a difficult resource to acquire anymore. But in terms of its general use, the Astrod Delphus is an extremely useful creature for traversing any Ark map. This thing can zip across any Ark map, as you can see right here, obviously using Element as the fuel there. But also the thing is, with this saddle, is that it is unlocked at a very, very high level. I think it's 115 or 120, meaning you will need to transfer your character over maps to actually reach that level, which means the saddle for this thing actually can be incredibly hard to get. But it is 100% worth it, as this thing is extremely useful for missions on Genesis Part 2, and it is just an extremely useful creature to have and use overall in your Ark gaming. In at number 7 is the Snowowl. Now this thing was first introduced on Extinction, but now can be found on maps like Fjorda, and because of that, this thing is accessible to every Ark player apart from mobile players, I think, and I don't know if Switch players have access to Fjorda, but most Ark players will have access to this thing. And what a great creature the Snowowl is. Firstly, this thing has the gliding ability, which it shares with the Griffin, except this thing has been much better implemented into the actual creature's design. It feels so much smoother and snappier with the glide on the Snowowl compared to on the Griffin. Also, in terms of its PvP use, this thing has a wealth of abilities for it as well. Firstly, it has this kind of heat seeking ability where you can seek out any Ark creature or organism that gives out any kind of heat, which can be extremely useful if you're trying to track down that annoying player that has just tried to raid your base and is trying to get away, or is just trying to get into your base in the first place. And if they're hidden away, you can simply turn this ability on and you can see right through objects and just see that player standing right there. You will also want to level up stamina as well, as that will be able to use the healing ability on the Snowowl, which is one of its most useful features. But it does have a slight handicap though, as this will heal every single type of creature in its healing radius, that being enemy or wild creatures or your own tamed creatures. But that could work in your favour if you're trying to quickly heal a wild creature that you are trying to knock out. In at number 6 is the Reaper, and what a creature the Reaper is. This thing is by far one of the best arc creatures in the game, and is a really useful and interesting tame to actually acquire. You will need to get impregnated by a Reaper Queen and raise your own Reaper King from scratch. Right from the start, you have to raise this thing, and also if you want to get that 100% effectiveness, make sure to get all of that XP while the baby is still inside of you. And this really is not an easy task. Firstly, you'll need to get the Reaper Queen to a really low health stat. I think it's under 1000 HP. Then you go up to it and it will impregnate you, and then you'll need to gather all of that XP to get yourself maximum effectiveness. Yes, it isn't necessary, but if you're going through all of this effort to get into it, you might as well. And at the stage of the game, when you're actually going to be getting one of these things, unless you're on Gen 2, you really do have the time and the access to get all of that XP. And once you have done that, this is an insane creature which really will take you far in all of Ark. The Reaper really is an insanely strong creature that can smash through any creature that may face you. It is probably even more powerful than the Giga when put to good use. In at number 5 is the Bloodstalker, and what an absolutely insane creature this is. This is probably the best creature out there for travel, besides a creature that is further on in the list. The Bloodstalker can simply zip across the general Ark map, and it travels at such immense speeds. Once actually controlled properly, there is pretty much no match to it. Also, the Bloodstalker is great in water as well, being able to skim across the surface of any body of water, and just being a generally great swimmer as well, which is an extremely useful feature to have, especially on a travel mount, as there is no environment that the Bloodstalker can't go in effectively and go through quickly and easily. Obviously, once you know how to control this thing properly. And once controlled properly, unlike how I control it, because I'm really not that great when controlling the Bloodstalker, you have yourself an insanely good travel mount that is great for gathering many hexagons across Genesis Part 1, as many missions will require that Bloodstalker to be used to gather all of those hexagons. For example, the Bog Race mission on Genesis Part 1 in the Bog Biome requires a Bloodstalker to be used to race across the Ark map to be able to finish the race in time, and it will get you through a series of loops across the Bog map on Genesis Part 1. And once done properly, it is a really fun mission to do, and also it is extremely rewarding as well, as the amount of hexagons you get and also the amount of enjoyment you get from controlling this thing is immense. In at number 4 is the Crystal Wyverns. Now you may think, why are these things so high on the list? Well, the main reason why they are so high on this list is these things are a really easy tame, and definitely one worth taming, as pretty much every Ark player has access to Crystal Isles. The Crystal Wyvern, unlike the normal Wyvern, is an extremely easy tame, just requiring a passive tame with you feeding it crystal. And there's a spot on its back where you can stand, where you can just simply press a button over a period of about 10 to 20 minutes, and then you have yourself a literal Wyvern. It can literally be your first tame on the map. What an insane thing to have. And especially if you tame a Blood Crystal Wyvern, you have yourself one of the best creatures on that map, and also one of Ark's best creatures overall, as these things are great for carrying a wealth of creatures around the map. These things also just are great for flying across the map as well, and they are reasonably good for metal runs too, and their damage isn't that bad as well. And with the Blood Wyverns, they can also suck blood out of other creatures, and I think that will regen them, or it will just rip loads and loads of health out of the creature that you're attacking. Definitely, if you can at some point tame yourself some crystal wyverns. They are ridiculously easy to do and 100% worth your time. In at number 3 is the rock drake. Yet again another aberration creature commonly associated with the Reaper. These two creatures really are the dominance of that map, and just some of the dominance of Ark in general. These things are both really insane creatures, but the rock drake in my opinion is far superior to the Reaper, as it can travel significantly faster, and it is really great for cheesing Rockwell on Aberration, which really means this thing is by far one of the most useful creatures on that map. And it is great for so many other maps as well, as it is a really quick travel mount that can deal a wealth of damage and also has a wealth of abilities. The rock drake can go invisible and can easily latch onto pretty much any surface. It's like the Thyla on so many steroids, and its stamina really is not an issue either. You will basically never run out of stamina on this thing. I barely ever run out of stamina on a rock drake. Their stamina drain is pretty much nothing. You'll be totally fine with it. And their weight is pretty decent as well, so you should have no concerns for any of those features. But also, in terms of the rock drake's damage, this thing really does pack a punch, which makes this thing also a very extremely useful travel mount, as sometimes travel mounts are good at the actual traveling, but they're not good at actually defending themselves during that travel, as when you're traveling across the Ark map, you'll probably run into several hostile creatures, so being able to defend against them is an extremely useful skill, which luckily the rock drake does very well. In at number 2 is the Mwing. This creature is yet again another Genesis Ark creature, but this time being found in Genesis Part 2 instead of Genesis Part 1. And what a creature the Mwing is. This thing has a wealth of really solid abilities, which makes this thing one of the best creatures in Ark in general. If ever I'm traveling around the Ark map, I will always, when applicable, use the Mwing. Obviously sometimes it isn't, as you'll have to gain so much elevation, and the Mwing isn't so great at that as it is at going down. This thing is great at gliding down from a height to a lower height, but it isn't the best at going up to higher heights, and unlike the rock drake, this can't really grip onto surfaces and things like that, but compared to the rock drake, it is a significantly faster glider. But also, apart from that, it does have a wealth of other abilities as well. Namely, this thing is really good at raising babies, and it is essentially a portable feeding trough that is literally infinite. And you can even steal baby creatures with the Mwing as well. This is a truly great creature that every Ark player should tame, and also if you're looking for some berries, this thing will gather that too. And finally, in at number 1 is the Shadowman. This is by far one of Ark's most recognizable creatures now. The Shadowman is just so widely used after its release in Genesis Part 2. Especially that now this thing is on pre-order, so it is accessible to the general Ark player, apart from Switch players and obviously mobile players. But I doubt mobile players are ever going to see the Shadowman actually come to their platform, but the Switch, obviously, there is hope now. In terms of the Shadowman's abilities, this thing can jump great heights and also can just leap pretty much anywhere over really long distances, which can be great if you're trying to catch someone in the sky out of the air and pull them back down. If you're in the sky, you are not safe from the Shadowman. They also have the hydration buff as well, alpha buffs, pack buffs. They basically have every single buff that you could think of, and they're really good in the water as well. And on top of all of that, they're fast, they're quick, they do so much melee damage. It is absolutely insane. They are by far some of Ark's best creatures out there. But anyway, that is the end of today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Also consider joining this channel's membership. It is only 99p. But with that, I will see you all in the next one. Bye.